access to the Tigray region, it remains unclear just how bad things are. We invited the Ethiopian government to come on our program to discuss the situation, but they refused our request, saying they did not want to share a platform with the TPLF, a group they view as, quote, a criminal enterprise. We are joined now by Getachew Reda, a spokesperson and executive committee member of the TPLF. Getachew, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
You're joining us on Upfront from an undisclosed location via telephone from the Tigray region. Oh, why?
Well, we're in a war zone. Like you said, since last November, the 4th of November, Abiy Ahmed's illegitimate government and his partners in crime, more particularly the Isaias regime in Asmara, have been launching a coordinated attack against the people of Tigray. Now we are in a war zone where the people of Tigray and the Tigray army have been waging a successful resistance against this coordinated attack by Abiy Ahmed, Isaias Afwerki, and his partners in crime. They are partners in crime, and it is quite obvious that it would be foolhardy for us to disclose where I am. Of course, I'm part of the resistance, and I am with the Tigrayan army. Like I said, we are waging an effective resistance, and we've been successful in checkmating the genocidal campaign by Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki and their partners in crime.
For months, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has denied the presence of Eritrean troops in the Tigray region, despite reports from the United Nations of human rights abuses by Eritrea in the region. Last week, he finally admitted that Ethiopian national forces and Eritrean soldiers had been fighting side by side. He also announced on Twitter that the Eritrean government agreed to withdraw its forces and that the Ethiopian National Defense Force would take over guarding the border, quote, immediately. Have Eritrean forces left?
No, they haven't left. In fact, there is no intention on the part of the Eritrean region to withdraw its forces, despite the protestations that the Eritrean forces have not been involved in the fighting. Abiy had to come forward and admit that it was, in fact, true that Eritrean forces were fighting alongside with his forces in Tigray. Now, when the international community tightens the screw on the issue of the Eritrean government, Abiy had to come forward and say the Eritrean government has agreed to withdraw its forces. But none of us hasn't heard from the Eritrean government whether there was an intention on the part of the Eritrean government to withdraw their forces. In fact, since the announcement of Abiy's tweet about Isaias' agreement to withdraw his forces, Eritrea has been increasing the influx of its forces into Tigray by leaps and bounds. But as far as Isaias and Abiy are concerned, withdrawal of their forces from the point of view of their survival is quite unthinkable because Abiy has already lost tens of thousands of Ethiopian forces. Most of them are being used as cannon fodder, so Isaias can use Ethiopian forces as cannon fodder, but apparently Isaias is tasked with hunting down the leaders. Unfortunately for them, the very people who are in the business of hunting us down are being hunted down right now.
I wanted to ask you a question about a comment that you made in December of last year. During an interview with Tigray TV, you called upon the people in the region to, quote, rise and deploy to battle in tens of thousands. Given that the Tigray opposition reports that tens of thousands of people are now dead and there have been numerous documented human rights abuses, do you regret the statement? Should you have worked harder to create diplomatic possibilities in the international community to get international support rather than rising up in the way that they did?
Well, I would be naive to assume that coordinating with Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki would have yielded different results than it has already. Because when in 2018 Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki inked the deal, it was specifically meant to neutralize TPLF because TPLF were considered as the only obstacle that stood between their regional ambitions. So whatever we might have done would not have averted facts. But yes, we could have done more diplomatically in the sense that we could have brought more attention to the evil principle that was obviously at work. And it is regrettable that people who should have been in the business of protecting civilians, people like Abiy Ahmed, who has been touted as a reformer by the West, was from the get-go interested in beating the people of Tigray into submission. And nothing could have stopped that, short of course, an effective resistance by the people of Tigray. So do I regret calling on the people of Tigray to come by their thousands? No, I don't regret it. I regret the fact that we could have
it's a bit stunning. I mean, there was a senior humanitarian official in Tigray who said that this could end up like a situation similar to Yugoslavia, where we'll be digging up mass graves for more than a decade. When I look at that amount of violence, when I look at that amount of death, it prompts the question, was there room, despite the circumstances you've just laid out, was there room for some alternative? Maybe not ultimately no violence, but certainly, at least in the short term, some diplomatic possibility, some international coalition that could have led to an outcome that was different. Is there anything you could have done differently?
Well, look, it would require a wizard of sorts to dream up a situation where Abiy and Isaias could have been persuaded against the kind of bloody intervention they went ahead for. But the international community should have and could have done better in terms of reining Abiy in.
Is there currently any line of communication between the TPLF and the Abiy government?
No, none at all. Only through the barrel of gun, as it were.
What is the end game here? Does the TPLF want Tigray to become its own state? Is that the ultimate goal here?
I can address this question only by giving you my take on what it means to be an Ethiopian. Within the TPLF, I have been one of the staunchest proponents of a strong Ethiopian state. I have no clue whatsoever how this very notion of strong Ethiopian state could be solved through an individual figure right now who's been finding himself and his people at the receiving end of Ethiopia's genocidal adventures. Now, it would be absolutely impossible for a staunch proponent of Ethiopian state like myself to come out in public and argue for the continuity of Ethiopian state. I'm not saying Ethiopia should go down the drain, but I have no capacity whatsoever to avoid that kind of decision by the people of Tigray. So I would rather say at this point that it should be left for the people of Tigray to determine whether Ethiopia they should have their own state. I would strongly suggest that this is probably the best option there is at this point in time. It would be very foolhardy for me to come out in public and probably say tons of good things about Ethiopian state when what we have seen the last 5 months makes it abundantly clear that there is little that is left for any ordinary Tigrayans.
Getachew, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that you're not ruling this out. You're not ruling out the possibility of an independent state.
I'm not ruling it out. In fact, the situation strongly suggests that would probably be the most viable option.
Is the possibility of a state a realistic one, though? Because if it happens, you're landlocked between Sudan, Eritrea, Ethiopia. I was just curious. I understand you're not calling for one per se today, but you're not ruling out the possibility. I guess
I'm not ruling out. By the way, as far as I'm concerned, statehood is not just about being landlocked or whatever. Statehood is about the aspirations of people. And if the people of Tigray aspire to become an independent state, there is nothing whatsoever that could stand in the way of that aspiration. That's the bottom line. My issue is, like I told you, I was one of the staunchest proponents of a strong federal Ethiopian state. But even myself, a staunch proponent of Ethiopian state will have difficulty coming out in public and supporting the Ethiopian project. I don't think it is a viable option at this point in time. What I'm saying is I'm not entirely ruling out the possibility of Ethiopia rising from the ashes, but it is more idealistic, more romantic than realistic.
Getachew, Reda, thank you so much for joining me on Up Front.
My pleasure.